Next, we're going to have the Run Showcase, and that is by Les Landis, Real Life, Real-Time Communications. Les Landis is president of Landis and Associates, a management consulting firm that provides services in organizational communication, employee engagement, business process management, and continuous improvement systems. The firm serves clients in various industries, as well as government, education, nonprofit organizations. Les is nationally known for his expertise on the role of communications in performance improvement. His trademark messages about the program trap and the trust connection have been acclaimed in his seminars and conference presentations nationwide as provocative and inspiring, a breath of fresh air and a mind-blowing experience. Les is here to share the 7 core elements of an effective communication system that keeps employees tuned in, turned on, and focused on business and success. I give you none other than Les Landis. The right one.
One right. Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for having me here. And how many of you have ever seen the results of a typical organizational employee opinion survey about what the biggest problems are? And how many of you realize that one of the biggest problems, always one of the top 2 or 3, is lack of communication, poor communication? There's a tendency to believe that the reason for that is around interpersonal problems, lack of communication skills. And there's a certain amount of truth to that, but it's only part of the truth. The other truth is just poor communication systems and processes. And in order to design really effective communication systems and processes, I've developed this model that I call real life, real-time communication. And there's 7 main components to it. One is interaction, there's speed, there's availability of information, which is a policy question. There's access to information, which is a process question. There's relevance, inclusion, and authenticity. Now, what I have found in most organizations is that when you do a good job of having effective systems and processes based on these 7 key criteria, a lot of the interpersonal problems that we experience go away. So I'm going to talk through each one of these basic elements. And also I want to acknowledge that for the most part, where this has greatest application and impact is in larger organizations. If you've only got an organization of 2 or 3 people, obviously some of the kinds of things that we're talking about, they're still relevant, but they're not as problematic. And so, however, saying that, a lot of you work with organizations, larger organizations, and to the extent that you can really understand and embrace these principles and practices, you can help them help, or you can help, I want to help you help them do that with these principles and practices. So let's take a look at the first one, interaction. How many of you ever heard the concept of employees as a target audience? Employees are not a target audience, they are the organization. We have to stop thinking about them as people that we shoot messages out to and instead create a truly dynamic kind of way of communicating, an interactive way of communicating. There are some people who say what we need around here is more 2-way communication. My response is, what the hell other kind is there? And of course I say, well, you know, we send out messages and we do presentations and all. I say, you're talking about message distribution. I get it, but that's not communication. What people tend to call 1-way communication is like one-handed clapping. It may move the air around, but you're rarely going to make a connection, right? So I want to dig a little deeper into this interaction factor here. This whole concept of dialogue is critical, structured dialogue. Can't just be random dialogue, water cooler kind of stuff, although that certainly has its place, but how do you have structured dialogue? One of the key things and why it's so important, Marshall McLuhan is one of the great communication theorists of the 20th century. I love this phrase. He says, propaganda ends where dialogue begins. And let me tell you, a lot of people in organizations, employees really do feel that a lot of the stuff coming out of on high is pretty much propaganda. So how do we really get past that? We do that with dialogue. Another great comment, Jim Howden is the head of Root Learning. And this phrase, I think, is one of the most powerful I've ever heard. Dialogue is the oxygen of change. We're always talking about how are we going to manage change in organizations? How can we get people to change? How can we make forward progress? The best way to do that is through structured dialogue, because otherwise employees suffocate from the lack of oxygen that they suffer when they don't have really effective dialogue. How many of you ever heard the concept of the cascade? You know, how are we going to get information to employees? They think about it as a cascade, going down one level to another level to another level until it winds up in a dead pool at the end of the process. Here's a much better metaphor. We use a fountain. This is true communication. Information flows up, it flows down, it flows up, it flows down, it flows up, flows down in a continuous, virtuous cycle, in a structured, organized, systematic way, with daily stand-ups, with weekly continuous improvement huddles, with really effective business process management where you get people engaged who are really dealing with those processes every day. So what's the next one? Speed. There used to be a time, and when I was the head of corporate communications at a company called PET Incorporated, a major international organization, we put out a monthly newsletter, and we thought, wow, is that cool? Really communicating with people, right? Once a month, you've got to be kidding me. So we really have to shift our concept of how we make sure that people are getting the information truly, as I say, as the speed of light. How are we going to make it spontaneous, instantaneous, so that people have the information when they need it all the time? And what are the systems and processes that you have to put in place to ensure that that information is getting to people rapidly? And then they're having the opportunity again to have dialogue about it. Next one, availability of information. As I said before, this is a policy question. This is where you have to make a decision about what kind of information are we going to share with whom in the organization. That has to be thought out very carefully and thoughtfully. How many of you are familiar with organization, or actually with a practice called open book management? It started with a lot of organizations, probably 20 some years ago. And the whole fundamental principle is, look, we are trying to hide information from employees that's nonsense to be hiding from people. The more we can share that information in an effective, structured way, the better informed they're going to be, the more sense of control, the better sense of control they're going to have, and the better they're going to be able to perform. So how do we make sure that we've got a policy that basically says, ideally, the only thing that we're going to hide, quote unquote, from people or keep from people is confidential personnel files and true company secrets like the formula of Coke, right? Other than that, let's find a way to really be open with employees, really share key performance indicators, our financials, our metrics that help people understand where we are so that they can understand what's going on and what kind of things they can do to improve the organization. So again, that's a policy question. Now, access to information. It's one thing to have a policy that says, okay, you can have everything except personnel files and the formula to Coke, but I dare you to find it. If you don't have systems and processes that enable quick, rapid, easy access to information, the policy of availability is useless. So you got to make sure that you've got the right kind of systems and processes. Like I say, availability without access is like having a key without knowing what door it opens, right? So here's the next one, relevance. In an effort to try and make sure that we're doing a better job of communication, we have oftentimes gotten into what I call an information dump. We just send everything out to everybody. We CC everybody in every email so that people are just swamped with stuff. We're not really considering what really is relevant to people in order for them to be able to do their job. How can we make sure that don't give them too much of the stuff that they don't need, and truly enough of what it is that they actually do need? Next one is inclusion. It's really easy to leave somebody out of the loop. And I like this metaphor. Cutting someone out of the communication loop is like cutting off the nerve to part of the body. I like to think of an organization truly like a human body, right? And what happens if you cut off the nerves to the fingers or the legs? They become dysfunctional, and the entire body is not able to function effectively. Again, you got to kind of balance here, because you want to make sure that you're not just sending everything to everybody, but you also have to be looking at the other side of the spectrum, making sure that you're not leaving people out of the loop so that they have the information that they need in order to perform as well. So be very clear about that. Authenticity and transparency. There's a lot of nonsense that comes out of corporate headquarters and from on high. And I love this phrase, Warren Bennis. We use all these buzzwords. There's like this business bingo thing that people play when you hear the CEO say something. I got that. I got that. Bingo. The use of buzzwords, corporate buzzwords, anesthetizes you to the truth. Isn't that a cool phrase? I mean, think about the impact of that. So get away from the buzzwords. Make sure that we're really talking authentically and transparently. And why is that important? I'm just going to quickly run down these because they might not be as visible to people who are watching online. But problems are solved faster, work's done quicker, costs are controlled better, teams are built easier, relationships are more authentic, employees are more trusting, performance levels are higher, people feel more in the know, and reinforces open and honest communication. Is there any value in any of those things? That's what you get from better authenticity and transparency. And I want to share an example of what I'm talking about, okay? I'm going to look at how all 7 of those characteristics apply in an effective, dynamic, interactive town hall meeting instead of the typical one that I call the town hall lecture. This is what typically happens. You get a business update, you get presentations on various topics, you do some acknowledgement and recognition, and then you end with a Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Now, people usually just rush up to the microphone and get in line because they can't wait to talk. Is that right? No, you get a lot of crickets, or you get the same people who always want to talk all the time coming up to the microphone, asking silly questions. They're very inert, to say the least. So what's another way you can do this? All right. It's what I call a dynamic town hall meeting. You got some of the same things up front, but then you say, I have a question for you. I have a topic that I'd like you guys to discuss and give us feedback. So I want you to break into small groups. I want you to talk about that for 5, 7 minutes, whatever. I want you to come up with 2 or 3 things that are related to this question. Maybe we've got a new product that we're going to introduce, and we got some issues and challenges that we have to face. We want to hear what those are from you. So talk 5, 7 minutes, pick one person who's going to report, and then we're going to have everybody in the group hear what it is that you say. Now, all of a sudden, the crickets turn into this buzz in the room. You can't even get people to stop talking after 7 minutes. Highly interactive, highly relevant. And then, when it's time to report, the very same person who was afraid to step up to the mic is happy to stand up and report on what his team or her team said, because they got my back. I'm sharing everything that we talked about. So now all of a sudden, they're eager to talk. You identify some of the themes, and then at the end, you share that information back to all employees to say, here are the key things that came out of it, and here are the actions that we're going to take. Now, can you get a sense of how different that is from the typical town hall meeting? It really affects all of these things. It's much more interactive. Speed happening in the moment, availability of information, it's right there. Access is right there. Certainly relevant. Everybody is included, and there's a lot of authenticity and transparency in those conversations. So that's just an example of the application of those principles and practices. I actually have a spreadsheet that I've created that allows people to look at the various things that they do on the left side, rate themselves on those 7 characteristics, and see what kind of an average you come up with on each one of them. Used to work with Baldrige award-winning company. Don Wainwright was the head of it. I love this phrase. I used to see people talking and ask why they weren't working. Now I see them talking and I say, thank God they're communicating. I've come to believe that communication is everything. So that's it. Thank you very much. And any questions anybody has? Mark.
So am I feeling that this is going to help the introverts be more interactive, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
Versus just people in general just waiting?
Yeah, that's a great observation because you're right. If you don't set up the structure for interaction, the introverts are not going to jump in. Without that structure, there's no support for them to be able to do that. Yeah, it's a great point. Anybody else? Questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Great job. Thank you, Les.